Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Hofstra University, our friends from around the community, including our own Hofstra community. My name is Charlie Reardon. I'm the provost here at Hofstra. Distinct pleasure of serving in that role. I'm really excited to welcome you all to this afternoon's distinguished faculty lecture. So a little bit of background on the faculty lecture, a little bit of background on our distinguished faculty colleague. I'll save a little bit of time for his presentation. Okay, Alan? So just, again, background. Starting in 1981, Hofstra University inaugurated this distinguished faculty lecture series to highlight and to celebrate the scholarly and creative contributions of Hofstra's outstanding faculty members. And I want to point out, as Hofstra embarks now on our new strategic plan, Hofstra at 100, designed to ensure Hofstra is a vibrant and impactful institution as we celebrate our 100th anniversary in the year 2035, we're acutely focused on faculty excellence and celebrating that faculty excellence. Since the fall of 2000, this distinguished faculty lecture has occurred each semester, twice per year, once in the fall, once in the spring, and so today's lecture is the 63rd in this series. This fall's distinguished lecturer is Professor Alan Singer from the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Technology in the newly independent School of Education. It's a pleasure to acknowledge the school and its interim dean, Amy Catalano, is here, and many of Alan's colleagues. Professor Alan Singer is a sociology studies educator and an historian. He's a former New York City high school teacher, and he regularly blogs, as we all know, about education, history, and many related topics. Professor Singer is a graduate of the City College of New York and received both a master's degree and a PhD in American history from Rutgers University. He is the author or co-author of 9 books, including Social Studies for Secondary Schools in its 5th edition, Teaching Global History in its 2nd edition, Teaching Climate History in 2002, and Class-Conscious Coal Miners in 2024, the topic both of his lecture and his attire today. Professor Singer mentors new teachers and student teachers and provides curricular support to secondary schools in the New York metropolitan area. In 2016, he was recognized as the New York State Council for the Social Studies Educator of the Year. And twice here at Hofstra, Professor Singer has been selected as a Hofstra Teacher of the Year. So in today's presentation, Professor Singer examines the historical, social, and demographic factors that shape political consciousness with a focus on militant working class consciousness in the 1920s and its implications for understanding voting patterns in the 21st century, including, I believe, in 2024, 3 weeks from yesterday. Although early voting starts many places, and that allows me to tell you, including at Hofstra beginning September 26th, anyone who's registered in Nassau County can come here to Hofstra to vote. So this presentation, as I mentioned, is based on Professor Singer's new book, Class-Conscious Coal Miners, The Emergence of a Working Class Movement in Central Pennsylvania. Not to take the highlights of the lecture away, but I've been told by our distinguished faculty lecturer there will be singing, at least by him and maybe some others, certainly not by me. So on a very serious note, please join me in welcoming the 63rd Distinguished Faculty Lecturer, Professor Alan Singer.
Those of you who know me know I'm a really bad singer. We're going to listen to 5 songs during the course of the presentation. One of my students, Nick Zimmerman, who graduated as an undergraduate, is now in the MA program. He's on the guitar, trying to keep me a little bit in tune. Let's see. Being a dinosaur, I'm working from paper here. The first song is called Miner's Lifeguard. I'm going to just play a piece of it. It's Nick and me, and I'll sing along as well. And if you know the song, please join us. Let's see what I did. Nope, that was the wrong thing. Let's see. All right, it's nothing's happening. Now it's happening. That's it. Miner's life is like a sailor aboard a ship to cross the wave. Every day his life's in danger, still he ventures, being brave. Watch the rocks, they're falling daily. Careless miners always fail. Keep your hand upon the dollar and your eye upon the scale. Stand together, heed no operator's tale. Keep your hand upon the dollar and your eye upon the scale. I'm gonna pause that because enough. And can you see? Let's see. That's all the lyrics, but I'll talk about them. Bituminous coal miners, folk songs document the changing attitudes and militancy amongst the American working class. They were used to teach a marginally educated population, often with limited facility with English, about the value of labor organization. Originally, the tune for this song was a Welsh Methodist hymn. Many 19th century labor songs used religious music that people were familiar with. In this country, the hymn was also adopted as Life is Like a Mountain Railway, with Jesus as the engineer. And then during the Civil War, it became The Vacant Chair, about a family dinner minus a dead soldier. So in this version, bituminous coal miners' conditions are compared to a sailor's, bounced around on the waves of life. He is chastised for believing he can change his situation by himself, or for expecting it to change by itself. The religious version asks God to guide the pilgrim, but the miner's lifeguard charges miners to organize into unions so they can protect themselves. Class organization would implement God's will. Now, bituminous coal miners got paid by the ton of coal weighed on scales and then loaded on train cars at what was called the mine tipple. Coal companies frequently tried to short weight miners, so they were loading 2 for 1. Or they would deny them payment altogether, claiming a coal car contained impurities. The miners' only protection was a Union check weightman stationed on the tipple to keep the eye upon the scale and ensure an accurate weight. Now, this version of the song was traced by the minstrel of the coal mine patch, George Corson, to West Virginia about 1900. Now, this presentation examines the historical, social, and demographic features that shape political consciousness with a focus on militant working class consciousness in the 1920s, but also with implications for understanding voting patterns in the 21st century. Now, I began the project that became Class Conscious Coal Miners in the 1970s as a doctoral research when I traveled to central Pennsylvania coal fields to interview retired miners about their experiences in 1920 strikes and labor organization. It draws on interviews with the former miners, census records, library, union, and government archives, cultural artifacts, union and left-wing publications, newspaper and magazine coverage of events, and of course, their songs. Before I forget, I want to thank the Dean of Hofstra College and the Dean of the School of Education and the Provost Office for supporting publication of the book. I just want to show you a couple of pictures. This is a Thomas Hart Benton mural. It's now in Manhattan. But at the center of the mural are coal miners because of the prominence they had both in American industrial production, but also in organizing the labor movement, especially the CIO in the 1930s. An image of an underground coal miner. What they're doing is they're drilling into rock, they're blasting it away, and they're loading it with shovels onto cars. Coal miners lining up in the morning to enter the mine, often just covered with coal dust from the previous day's work. Coal miners tended to often work in pairs deep underground. Often the pairs would be father and son, or also sometimes an established miner with an immigrant. And that was one of the ways that mining and union were taught to new arrivals. If there were any impurities in a coal, it was dumped, and miners weren't paid for it. Young boys and girls would then scavenge it so they would have coal to heat their homes. Since I've come to Hofstra in my research and writing about teaching and learning, I focused on what educators call transformative consciousness, how to help students develop new critical understanding of the world and their place in it, but also how to promote active citizenship committed to progressive, democratic social change. In research and writing on opponents to slavery, I explored similar themes and also the nature of social movements. These explorations eventually brought me full cycle to a re-examination of class-conscious coal miners and their contributions to movement for social change. Between the 1920s and 1950s, central Pennsylvania bituminous coal miners were amongst the most militant and class-conscious workers in the United States. They led radical movements within the United Mine Workers of America and were instrumental in organizing the United Steelworkers Union and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, which we're all members of as the AFL-CIO and NYSET. They received national attention during World War II when they periodically launched work stoppages in violation of the federal wartime no-strike policies and against their own union officials. This was a Life magazine featured interviews with Nantiglow, Pennsylvania miners during one of their work stoppages. The miners struck during World War II because they were being exploited in the name of wartime patriotism. Conditions in mines deteriorated because of speed up to meet the wartime demand for coal. Frozen wages did not cover rising food prices. And the miners knew that the companies were making inflated profits because of corporate ties to government agencies and hearing. Guitarist Meryl Streep was one of the coal mining region, he's from Mulligan County, Kentucky, but he was one of the leading singers of the miners' movement, though he never actually worked in a mine. His music, especially 16 Tons and Dark as a Dungeon, captured in song the hardship and frustration of bituminous miners during the Depression and War. And this is just an excerpt from 16 Tons. Let's see if I can do it.
Some people say a man is made out of mud.
A poor man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood, skin and bone. A mind that's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older, deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I looked 16 ton, a number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, bless my soul, you load 16 ton. And what do you get? Another day older, deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Dump. back to the next thing. Okay. Most mine patches were isolated in mountain areas. Miners had little choice but to purchase necessities from the company store. When work was slack, when a miner was injured, or when a family member was sick, miners fell into debt to the company store. Some miners actually preferred to be a little bit in debt, figuring if there were layoffs, the company would keep them on so they could pay the company back. Now, the United Mine Workers Union was a national union of both bituminous, which is soft coal, and anthracite, which is hard coal. It was founded in 1890. They called it an international union because there actually were locals in Canada as well. The UMWA was divided into state districts, and some states, like Pennsylvania, had multiple districts because of the differences in coal fields. District 5, Western Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, had coal that was especially useful in the processing of turning iron ore into steel, coking coal. District 2 in Central Pennsylvania, where I studied, is near Johnstown. It had very rich coal deposits, but the coal seams were narrow, which made the coal more difficult and expensive to access. And let me go to the next one. No. And this is, you can see here where the eastern region of the United States coal fields, basically they're contiguous with the Appalachian Mountains. Now, no, next. Okay, this is just a map of Pennsylvania by county, and the area that I studied primarily is here, Cambria County. And that would be Pennsylvania UMWA District 2. It's Cambria County. And let's see, one more on this one. A close-up of Cambria County. And this is the town of Nantiglow. Now, I picked Nantiglow. It's kind of weird. John Brophy's daughter was an academic. He was the head of District 2. So I contacted her to find out where I could get material. And she said, my aunt still lives in that area. Why don't you go speak to her? So I drove out there, and her aunt and her aunt's son then introduced me to coal miners. People were willing to talk to me because I went around with basically John Brophy's great grandson. Now, most of the interviews I did with retired coal miners focused on events in central Pennsylvania's District 2 and the town of Nantiglow. John Brophy, who was from Nantiglow, was the president of the district from 1916 to 1927. And he had actually organized the locals in that district. When he moved up to the state district office, his brother-in-law, William Welsh, took over the leadership of the local union. It was William Welsh's daughter and William Welsh's grandson which introduced me to the other coal miners. Now, Brophy headed the UMWA committee exploring nationalization of the mines after World War I. He developed innovative labor education campaigns and organizing strategies to combat open shop drives by coal operators during the 1920s. One of the things they did is Penn Railroad owned a lot of the mines, and their offices was in Manhattan. So miners and their families went to picket in Manhattan outside Pennsylvania Railroad's offices. Now, Brophy runs for president of the union unsuccessfully in 1926 in an election that was tinged by massive fraud. The incumbent was not giving up the office. I don't know if that ever happened again, but now, because he challenged the incumbent, he ended up being blacklisted from the union. However, in the 1930s, when John Lewis, who had been president of UMWA, becomes active in establishing the CIO, he brings Brophy in because Brophy was the best organizer in the coal miners' union. Brophy had one interesting decision. There was a young man at Harvard who decided he wanted to join the working class after World War I, and his name was Powers Hapgood. Now, Hapgood then goes out, meets with Brophy, and then gets a job in the mines, interviewing miners. Now, Hapgood's mother was a wealthy family, and his mother was very worried. So Hapgood wrote letters to his mother every night about what he did that day in the coal mines. And Hapgood later becomes the CIO, chief organizer in Indiana. So all the letters to his mother are at the University of Indiana in Bloomington. So it's an amazingly rich source. The District 2 material was pretty much damaged, but the United Mine Workers material was sent to Washington, D.C. And what happened was two things fortuitous. One, the opposition group finally takes over the Miners' Union in 1970, and they had no idea of what was in the archives, so they were willing to let me in, so I would tell them what was in the archives. The other thing is the invention of the copy machine. So I didn't have to take notes. I just copied everything. I mean, but we didn't have computers yet. Everything had to be typed up by hand. So between Brophy and Hapgood, tremendous amount of data to understand. Now, one of the District 2's innovation to support striking miners was called the Labor Chautauqua. Remember, many of these were religious, and a lot of them had been Protestant. And what happens in the Protestant church is you would have traveling tent revivals called Chautauquas. So what Brophy and the miners decided, well, why don't we do that to maintain the union? So they had traveling labor Chautauquas, teaching people, preaching union rather than preaching Jesus. Now, women were not legally permitted to work in the coal fields of the United States prior to the 1940s, although there were always some women who worked surreptitiously in family mines. Now, although they were not miners, the women were mothers, wives, daughters, and they were the key in many instances to the success of the union struggles. In 1924, Heisley, one of the largest coal companies in Cambria County, had 564 employees, announced it was going to close its operation and then reopen non-union. Now, the Nantiglow women organized not just to picket the company to keep out scabs, but they would go through the company housing denouncing people who went to work. And apparently the homes of the Heisley employees, and they would insult them, and 11 of the women were arrested. But they were the ones that kept the strike going. And next slide, if I could figure it out. Striking coal miners barricade the streets. It was as important enough strike because it was challenging the open shop drive and the federal government's complicity with the owners that made the New York Times. Now, during strikes, lay auxiliaries sponsored women's labor education classes and acted as picket support committees. The women formed choral groups to perform at the labor Chautauquas, to entertain and to educate. Oh Stranger Listen was written by Clara Johnson, who was a Nantiglow school teacher, and Mrs. Arthur Cook, the wife of a striking miner, and they were members of the labor Chautauqua choir. And my research suggests it's based on the hymn, The Wayfaring Stranger, which is Psalm 39:12 and Psalm 119:19. I'm sure some of you are more familiar with that than me, like Stacy. I should have made you sing it. Let me find Wayfaring Stranger. I think I may be in the wrong song.
Good news to you, worker.
Nope, that wrong song. Okay, this one.
Stranger, why did you come here? To take our homes? and bread away. Or won't you leave your work today and join us? Now we pray. Won't you join us? Won't you join us? Fighting for our rights today. We're going to win. You know we will. So join us. Now we pray.
Now we pray. We're talking about people living in rural areas, total isolation and mind patches. These were the things that sustained their struggle. Now, during the 1920s open shop drive in central Pennsylvania, companies used a number of strategies to break the union. They would import scabs, hire private police to keep mines working, and they encouraged racial, ethnic, and religious tension to undermine worker solidarity, including supporting KKK activities. In the second half of one of the miners I interviewed tipped me off that another of the miners, he and his father-in-law were in the Klan in the 1920s. I was able to put documentation together, so when we went to interview him, we did not tell him we knew who they were, but we gave him a chance to tell his story, but that helped us to flush it out. In the second half of the 20th century, into the first decades of the 21st century, central Pennsylvania miners and their families suffered a series of economic and social catastrophes, including renewed anti-union activity by coal companies, mine closings, exodus of young people, debilitating medical issues like black lung, and the opioid epidemic, institutions that contributed to the militant working class consciousness in the 1920s and sustained families through dark times in earlier decades, work, union, and community, diminished or disappeared. Merrill Travis described the growing sense of enemy in Dark as a Dungeon. Okay.
Come, O young fella, so young and so fine, seek not your fortune in a dark, dreary mine. It'll form as a habit and seep in your soul, till the stream of your blood runs as black as the coal. Well, it's dark as a dungeon, damp as the dew, dangers are double and the pleasures are few, where the rain never falls and the sun never shines. It's dark as a dungeon way down in the mines.
All right, back to this one. Can't see. In the 1920s, there were probably about 300,000 members of the United Mine Workers of America in the United States, and over 500,000 coal miners. Bituminous coal production. So talk about 60% of the miners were organized. By 2000, there were fewer than 70,000 coal production workers in the United States. About 30,000 were members of the miners' union. In 1950, central Pennsylvania bituminous coal mines employed 21,000 workers. By 2000, they employed 1,200. A total collapse of the industry. Now, I was able to track changes in the community using census data. Some of you are not familiar, but when you fill out your census form, government does summary reports, but they are kept secret for 72 years. So the 1920 census becomes public in 1992. The 1930 census becomes public in 2002, and the 1940 census becomes public in 2012. Well, when I did the original study in the 1970s, I didn't have any of that material available. But during COVID, when I was on sabbatical and locked up in our apartment, driving poor Felicia crazy, I decided to go back to my dissertation because I now had all this census data, and that became the book. Now, in 2000, the population of Nantiglow was about 3,000 people. By 2010, it declined over 10%. But not only had it declined, it was an aging population, increasingly female and poor. Per capita income in this community was $14,000 compared to $26,000 in the United States. Overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly poor because the jobs had left, and when the jobs left, so the young people. About 15% of the population and a quarter of the children live below the official poverty line. Now, conditions in Nantiglow and Cambria County transformed an area once noted for working class consciousness and political militancy into a conservative political stronghold. While the United Mine Workers of America did not support any presidential candidate 2016 to 2020, in both presidential elections, Cambria County and Nantiglow voters cast their ballots heavily for the Republican Party candidate Donald Trump, who had promised to restore coal mining. Oh, by the way, he didn't. Now, Donald Trump took Cambria County with 66% of the vote. In the two Nantiglow election districts, Trump led Hillary 62 to 35 and 69 to 26. So an area that had been very, very radical has now become very, very conservative. In 2020, Cambria County and Nantiglow voters went even more heavily for President Trump. Cambria County, Donald Trump got 68% in 2020, and in Nantiglow, Trump defeated Biden by 68 and 75% in the two voting districts. Now, in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, Reuters interviewed Pennsylvania coal miners about their views on the candidates. 25 out of the 26 interviewees said they supported Donald Trump for re-election. Most expressed fear that Biden's commitment to clean energy meant his election would be a final death blow to the bituminous coal industry. And then these coal miners remain loyal to Donald Trump despite his failed promise to revive the industry. After the 2020 election, many of Cambria County's Republican voters supported Donald Trump's claim that the election was stolen. A New York Times article quoted a retired truck driver who called Biden a total fool, Harris a scary woman, and argued that a Biden presidency would be illegitimate and disastrous. And other people interviewed in the article had similar positions. Commentators across the political spectrum have offered explanation for Donald Trump's election in 2016 and continued support from his political base after his defeat in 2020. White working class voters, particularly voters without a college degree, and especially white men from rural areas, turned against traditional Republican candidates and a Democratic Party they once supported. I mean, in the 30s, this was FDR country. Because they felt abandoned by changes sweeping through the country, and especially in their communities. Class consciousness based on work, union, and community that had once sustained radical resistance to coal operators dissolved with the diminution of these institutions over the decades, leaving ethnic identification and grievance, producing a swing to a very different kind of political behavior. As the United States on Long Island prepare for the 2024 presidential and congressional elections, one of my questions in writing the book was, why did a region that produced such a militant working class movement become a bastion of right-wing conservatism? Well, we don't mind bituminous coal in Long Island. You can make the case that a similar change has been affecting voting patterns on Long Island in 2016, 2020, and 22. It's something the Democratic Party will have to address if it wants to reclaim some of the area's congressional seats and a majority in the House of Representatives. From my work on central Pennsylvania bituminous coal miners and labor union activists, I've learned a number of lessons as an historian, as an activist, and as a teacher. As an historian, I identify with Marxist scholarship in the broadest sense. Just a piece aside. my introduction to singing as a way of understanding the ideas of ordinary people. As an undergraduate in college, I read W.E.B. Du Bois's The Soul of Black Folk, which was based on the music of free blacks after the Civil War. As a graduate student, I met Edward Thompson, who wrote The Making of the English Working Class. Thompson's work used working class songs to understand the transformations taking place in Great Britain, late 18th, beginning 19th century. Now, the thinker I'm most interested in is an Italian Marxist named Antonio Gramsci, who wrote in the World War I era. He discussed two very important ideas for me as a teacher and as a historian. One he called hegemony, and the other he called organic intellectuals. Hegemony describes the way ideas that support the dominant class in a society become accepted as an intellectual norm by all segments of society, including those whose interests are undermined by those ideas. Hegemonic ideas supporting capitalism and the capitalist class, like championing minimum government and unregulated industry, opposing labor unions because they interfere with the workers' freedom, seeing hierarchy and unequal distribution of material goods and wealth as an inherent feature of society, and promoting ethno-nationalism as an alternative to class solidarity. These ideas make it exceedingly difficult to challenge the status quo under normal circumstances, especially when there's an alliance between economic, political power, and institutions. The coal miners in the 1920s were directly challenging that hegemonic idea of that society. And it was the breakup of the industry and the breakup of the union that undermined their struggle. Now, all of this was regularly apparent as class-conscious coal miners battled against corporate power and the Republican administrations that wanted to destroy unions. And they also had to struggle against business unionists controlled the UMWA, who hoped finally to partner with the operators in the government and who wanted the miners to make the sacrifices. Now, Gramsci argued that the way you could counter this powerful force of hegemonic dominance was the organic intellectual. Now, organic intellectuals like John Brophy, who on one hand was a coal miner, but on the other hand believed very much in education and was willing to ally with broader labor forces to bring education to the workers in District 2. They are what Gramsci describes as organic intellectuals of the working class who can make a difference in social movements, and Brophy demonstrates that again when he helps to organize this CIO. They make social change possible. Now, as an activist studying the interchange between Brophy and Powers Hapgood, in 1928, the radical movement within the miners' union is destroyed. Some of the miners have joined the Communist Party of the United States, which at the time they're indigenous radicals. They weren't spies from Russia. Some of them had joined the Communist Party, and they came up with the idea of organizing a new union, a separate union that would be based on radical ideas that the miners had fought for the last 10 years. Now, Brophy and Hapgood were originally working with the communist miners. They were part of that radical movement, and they broke with them. And what they argued is that making decisions based on your ideological beliefs rather than an analysis of what was actually taking place was self-defeating. And they said, no miners are going to join a new union because the operators are not going to hire them. But again, I thought it was very, very important. Yeah, your ideas are important, but you have to analyze the world, the real world, what's taking place. Now, as a teacher, I learned a very valuable lesson about teaching from the struggles of bituminous coal miners. I often tell pre-service teachers that if you said it, but they didn't hear it, then you didn't teach it. The key to teaching and union organizing is not what you say, what the students and the workers say. You can't be a successful teacher or organizer if you don't listen to what your students or the workers are concerned about. Otherwise, they have no reason to trust you. In District 2, miners were paid by the ton of coal they loaded, so they were unhappy about unpaid dead work. Time spent widening tunnels because even widened tunnels were too narrow for modern machinery. So what they had to do is, even in the wider tunnels, they could get track in, but they couldn't get an engine in. They had to push the coal cars out into the main passages. And they weren't getting paid for that. So that was their concern. Well, with Brophy and the District 2 officials, because they had been miners in these mines, and because they knew these guys, they made those the main issues for the local union. They listened to what people said, and therefore people would listen to them. Now, I'm going to end with one last coal miner song, union song. Which side are you on? In 1931, coal miners in Harlan County, Kentucky were on strike. Armed company deputies roamed the countryside, terrorizing the mining communities, looking for union leaders to beat, to jail, and to kill. Coal miners fought back, and heads were bashed and bullets fired on both sides in what came to be known as Bloody Harlan. One day during this tense period, Florence Reese, the wife of a striking coal miner, wrote the words to the song, "Which Side Are You On?" Once again to a traditional hymn. And this simple song tells why workers must join unions. All right, let me find it. I think that's our last song. Please sing if you feel moved. Okay. And again, thank you, Nick.
Good news to you workers, good news to you I'll tell of how
the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Which
side are you on?
boys?
Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on?
My
Daddy was a miner, and I'm a miner's son, and I'll stick to the union till every battle's won.
Oh, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? They
Say in Harlan County, there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a union man or a thug for J.H. Blair.
Oh, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Oh,
Workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab or will you be a man?
Oh, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on, boys? Oh, which side are you on? Don't
Scab for the bosses. Don't listen to their lies. Us poor folk haven't got a chance unless we organize.
Oh, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
All right. Now, if I can figure out how to turn this off, we're done. Thank you very much. Oh, and if you really want, I'm not pushing. The publishers sent some books.
Before we get to the books, there's opportunity for questions. And so Allison has a microphone. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and she'll get it to you.
Thank you.
So now we know why you're set to retire. You're launching a singing career. Watch out, Taylor Swift. Is it a direct line from the collapse of the coal mining jobs to the blue to red shift in Cambria County?
I believe so. Even when I went in the 1970s, it was already poor. People were living in the 50s. The company, as they're divesting, they sell the shacks to the people who lived in them. And so these are people 20 years later are still living in the same shacks. The other thing one of the things that's so depressing about these communities is, I think I showed you a sign of kids taking coal from these dead piles. You go through them, there are just mountains of waste coal that couldn't be processed at the time. And so when it rains, it just pours off the hills black. But one of the things that in some ways even more disturbing now, Joe Manchin in West Virginia, his company owns those hills of waste coal, but they now have a process to use it. So here is waste coal that the miners didn't get paid for that Joe Manchin is marketing. But yeah, it's the collapse of the industry means the collapse of the union and then the voting shift.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. I wanted to ask you a question which relates to the name Cambria and the name of the town that you focused on. They're both essentially Welsh names. And so all the time you were talking, I was thinking about the collapse of the coal mining industry in South Wales as well. And that collapse, of course, was in significant degree an artificial collapse. It was collapsed, by the Thatcher government. And do you think it's true to say that that the sort of correlation between the political change that you describe and the collapse of the mining industry was planned? In other words, in the case of Thatcher, it was absolutely an attack on the unions, which was fundamental, an attack on the left wing, which was the threat to everything that she stood for. Was it similarly planned? Was the collapse planned? Was it fundamentally a political move?
Yeah, the answer is yes. During World War I, you had a vast expansion of coal production because coal was still being used on ships transporting weapons and soldiers back and forth across the Atlantic. So what happens after World War I is the coal companies own mines in both what's called the union mines, or the central competitive field, which is Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. And they start buying up non-union mines further south, West Virginia, Kentucky. So what the companies did was, after World War I, they shifted production from the traditional union mines to the non-union mines, which they now owned. In an effort, they closed the union mines to break the union. When they reopened the mechanized with far fewer miners needed. So that was a clear plan in the 1920s, and it was supported by the federal government. After World War II, the situation was somewhat different. The problem was the shift to oil and away from coal as a primary fuel. In the end, we benefit from it. But again, what the companies do is they divest. They own oil and coal, and they just shifted production. So there was never any concern for the workers. It was always profit. Oh, and the reason the names are Welsh is because a lot of the initial miners are coming from the British Isles. And what's fun, John Brophy's, during the Great Irish Famine, the Irish are fleeing. Brophy's father was Irish. Brophy's father goes to England to work in the North Country mines, and then brings so Brophy is born in England, then brings the family into Pennsylvania. But William Welsh, his family was Welsh. And again, that's why a lot of the hymns were Welsh.
Alan, I'm wondering if during the oral histories, when you were doing the interviews, you know how when you do interviews, sometimes there's kind of a jaw drop moment or something, or just something that's really?
Yeah.
And then you can't really say it that way, but but you're listening intently. I wondered if there were any things that were shocking or surprising in the interviews.
I mean, the stuff about the Klan. What happened was we were going through surviving records of the local newspaper and surviving records of field reports. And that's where I came across the Klan. And so I began to put the story together. And what happened was I guess it was 1925, when Hinesley wants to reopen non-union. There's a big fight within the union what to do. And one side identifies as the Protestant workers, and the other side is just a very mixed group. And then it turns out that the Protestant workers were Klan. So I didn't know about the Klan, and neither did the people who were taking me around. But then once we realized what was going on, we were then able to interview the son-in-law of the Klan leader, and who basically substantiated everything. He just didn't call it Klan. They were American. That was the first one thing. The other thing is interesting. 1919, the National Union passed a resolution calling for nationalization of the mines, formation of a labor party, and nationalization of the railroads. Very socialist agenda. That's what originally attracted me to look at the coal miners, because of that agenda. But as I went through the minutes to their meetings, I realized that it was just they passed a motion, but they didn't really believe in it. And then what they did was they created a committee, which is what they do, to explore the idea. Brophy becomes head of the committee, but then they squash his reports because they're not interested in it. So here I thought I was going to be looking at a very radical national union, and it turns out it wasn't, but that the radicalism was embedded in locals. It's like, I did my proposal based on the national, and then I had to change my research direction when I discovered I was wrong. So I guess those were the two big things.
And I guess the discovery of the Hapgood letters.
Yes, the Hapgood. Oh, just a kind of a funny thing about doctoral research. So as an undergraduate, I began exploring the International Garment Workers Union. So my original plan, that was my senior seminar paper as an undergrad. My original plan was going to look at radicalism in the Garment Workers Union. And then I went look at their archives and the Tanneman collection at NYU, and I discovered that a lot of it was either written in Yiddish or in Italian. It was easier to drive to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, than it was to learn to read Yiddish and Italian.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. We need to give you a radio show, and you could play and talk about these things. I want to go following up on the interviews and on the oral histories and get to make more sense, because I hear all the time that from blue, from radical to what we're seeing now, and it's not a slow process. It's been going on for a long time. What is it? I mean, and the people that you spoke to, what is it that that made them think that way? I mean, was it a disaffection with radical politics? Was it a loss of faith of union organizing? Because it was really a lot of it out of their hands. And this was a bipartisan government, corporate, collaboration in collapsing the industry. And we see it a lot right now. For example, NAFTA. I forget somebody mentioned NAFTA in the session the other day. How there were, progressives were warning and knocking the warning signals about what NAFTA would have done for collective bargaining in the North here, not to mention connecting it with workers in Mexico as an organizing strategy. And now we're seeing people like Tucker Carlson denouncing that, right? Denouncing those arrangements made by corporate America. And it wasn't a democratic thing only, although Clinton, of course, was in power when NAFTA was passed. But this is a corporate, bipartisan process. So it's still, I'm still not convinced as to, or don't understand that radical shift from being at the heart of union and radical political organizing to where we are today. And I'm just wondering if some of the people that you talked to conveyed to you what some of those reasons were for that shift.
Well, philosophically, there's an idea that I think has tremendous meaning for social movements and stuff. The paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould comes up with an idea called punctuated equilibrium. And he's looking at species, and he argues that in biological evolution of species, there are long periods of stasis where species essentially remain unchanged, followed by relatively rapid transformation. And so he calls it punctuated equilibrium. Equilibrium, change, equilibrium, change. And he uses that theory consistent with Darwin, but he moves away from gradualism. And in my work on social movements, I find social movements tend to function in the same way. One of the things I studied was the abolitionist movement. Between 1830 and 1850, nobody listened to the abolitionists. It was stalled, tremendous infighting. And all of a sudden, over the next 10 years, there's civil war, and they helped to transform American slavery. So what happens is just for a long time, and then all of a sudden change. In that case, what changed was the fugitive slave laws, and that gave tremendous power to their claim that the nation could not remain half slave, half free. I think that what happened for these people, the 30s, the New Deal coalition, sustains them in their way of looking at the world, basically from the election of FDR really through the election of Lyndon Johnson. That's the New Deal coalition. And then very rapidly, after 1965, there's a very quick change. And I think there are the two fundamental forces. One is three, actually. One is globalization. Because all of a sudden, manufacturing jobs are leaving the United States and going to other parts of the world. So I think the fundamental change is the global industrial shift. I think these people get left behind by that globalized process. And I think that's the start of the rapid transition. Their disenchantment, the disillusionment with the FDR New Deal coalition. What also happens is they have enemies that they could blame it on. And there are new immigrants coming in after 1965, and you have the civil rights movement. So what happens, up until the globalization begins to destroy jobs, the labor movement is very interracial. So the labor movement provides a way of bridging people who are ethnically, religiously, and racially different. But with the collapse of the labor movement, with the globalization wiping out these industries, the connections, the class connections with other people, those experiences dissolve. So here you have globalization taking away the jobs. You have new people who they could blame for their circumstance, and you have the basic collapse of their communities. You know, their children move away. They never see their grandchildren. They just become completely disillusioned with what's taking place. And I think that's what we're looking at. And I think the key point is that point in the 1960s. Yeah.
On that one? So what I understood you to say, and part of Mario's question, is there these forces that are pushing in a direction, disenfranchisement. At what point do the opportunities and the new voices that enter the marketplace grab a hold of those people that have become disenfranchised and looking to blame and pull them? Because I think the pull is as important as the push into one direction or the other?
Well, one of the things that, here we're looking at the election of 2008, I think, where Barack Obama is elected president. And in many ways, he begins to represent the transformation that they're unhappy with. So you get the emergence of the Tea Party, starting about 2010, and then you get the emergence of Trump in 2016. So what you have are something that's pulling them, and saying that your country is being stolen, your way of life is being invaded, your way of life is being destroyed. I think that's what we're looking at in the 2024 campaign. I think it hit these people earlier because of the collapse of coal, but I think that the appeal of the Trump campaign is to that kind of disillusionment. There's I forgot the names of the people, but they two sociologists did a study. One is called Case. I don't remember the other. Denton Case did a study of the opioid epidemic and its impact on these communities. And what they said was, it's an epidemic of despair, they called it. And I think that these communities, that's that epidemic. Again, opioid adds to it. But if you think about it, the opioid epidemic, which destroys what remains, is coming from big pharma. It's coming from the East Coast. It's coming from the people they want to target. It's coming from the Jews. Anita knows. Not from China. But again, it gives them people to focus on and target. And I think that's the pull as opposed to the push.
Please join me in thanking Alan for a fantastic lecture. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.